I have done way too many videos today, but I'm going to have final assignment to do in the next couple of days, so I'm going to be absent for a couple of days. So I'm setting you guys up with content during that time. I have gotten some questioning comments, or have seen some questioning comments about the number of jubilees related to 6,000 years of world history. I put a video out earlier which addressed this. It's like, okay, hey, if you guys want to count by 50, then you're going to have to count 70 jubilees by 50, and you're going to put the rapture in 2095. That's what happens when you use 50s to count rather than 49s, because you would essentially make the jubilee a standalone year rather than the first year of the next 7 sevens, which it should be. So you would count by 49s to get to the 50th year. When you do that, if 1406, then 2025. What I do then is use that same methodology to count back to get us as close to 6,000 years as possible. Well, people who have this ingrained mentality of 120 jubilees times 50 equals 6,000 are reticent about this. And I will point you back to the very first thing that I said. If you have that thought and you are saying jubilees are by 50s, then you are saying the rapture couldn't be until 2095 because it's tied to the 70th Jubilee. That's not going to change. So all you're doing is making it a period of time when you won't be alive. So I doubt that that's what you're intending to do, and yet that's exactly what you would be doing if you are determined to count by 50s. The correct way to count is by 49s to get to the 50th year. So if you can use that same method to count forward from 1406 when they started to 2025, then you can use the same method to count backward to a creation date and approximate 6,000 years of world history. So that's the first thing, is kind of combating this erroneous idea of 100 times 50 equals 6,000. They're not counted by 50s, they're counted by 49s. So you have to collapse that idea. If you still have questions about what 2 Peter 3 intends, then we can have that conversation, but I already did a video earlier about that, so I'd really encourage you guys to just watch that, and it is called, Are There to Be Exactly 6,000 Years of World History? I already went through all of this, so I'm not going to repeat myself. The question that has now come up is, well, that makes sense, counting by 40s, but still not sure about the 123. Well, that's just how many there are. If you're trying to get as close to 6,000 and counting by plus or minus 49, that's just how many there are in order to get as close to 6,000 as possible. If you start reducing that, you're way under 6,000. So if you're good with that, then fine. But that's just the nature of that beast. That's the way that it has to be, is if you're counting the correct, appropriate way by plus or minus 49, the closest you can get to 6,000, which is in the likeness of the Sabbath. One day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. Not exact, but in the likeness of. That's just the way that it works out. So I don't really know what more to say about that. But what I want to re-emphasize for the new folks, who we have a lot of, so hello and welcome to you all who might be watching this video. What I would like to emphasize is that hopefully we know that the law foreshadowed Christ. The law was not the very image of things. It was a way to point people to the Messiah when he came. Understanding that the purpose of the law was to point people to Christ, this is a representation of Christ's timeline in type and shadow, from the giving of the law on Sinai in Exodus 19 all the way to Joshua 13 with the parceling of the lots to the tribes in the promised land. While I understand that there is reticence about the even 6,000, while I understand there is reticence about the 123, I'm going to show you how Exodus and Joshua validates this is correct in type and shadow. So take the years out. Actually, I'll just do this. Maybe. Delete. Okay. We're just going to take those out and we're going to look at color coding, because that's really what I want you to do, is look at color coding. And as Eileen commented earlier, I love me some good color coding. I love color coding. So basically what we're looking at here is there's a benchmark event. It's the giving of the law on Sinai. In Exodus 19, there was a command that God gave, be ready against the third day. On the third day, he descended in smoke and fire on the top of Mount Sinai and covenanted with the people. Then there was a command. This first period of like light blue is 40. And it represents the time when Moses was commanded to go up the mount for 40 days. God would meet with him and give him the tables of stone handwritten by the finger of God. And just to note, if you read through the book of Exodus, you will find all of this correlated to truth. I actually went through the book of Exodus to start on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. That was my ringing in the new year, was going through the entire book of Exodus. So I already validated this again at the beginning of this year. I have a playlist for the book of Exodus if you would like to go through it. Many hours of videos, but I just went through it. So I literally just revalidated this. For those of you who have questions about this, I've had this up on my page for half a dozen years. This is not new to my channel. This may be new to you, but this is not new to me. So I've known about this for a long time. This isn't just, secret special knowledge. But anyway, this period of blue is the first 40 days that Moses was up the mount. Then there are 2 days down the mount. The first was the Levites slaying the people to a tune of about 3,000 people died that day. The next was him meeting with the Lord in the tent of the tabernacle of meeting and pleading with the Lord not to take his spirit away from the people, which God was going to do. But Moses was interceding for the people. So he said, okay, fine, I won't, I'll stay with you, but you're coming back up my mount tomorrow and we're going to do a do-over. So then Moses was up the mount for 40 days, receiving the tables of stone again. This period of time, when we plug the numbers back in just a moment, is going to correlate to the time when Jesus actually had his ministry. Moses was a foreshadow. When he came down the mount, I think this is in Exodus 34. You can read about this. But when he came down the mount from that second period of 40 days, his face was shining from being in the presence of the Lord, and the people couldn't look upon him, so he had to wear a veil. That's a preview of the Transfiguration, where during that same time period in actual world history, Moses and Elijah were going to appear with Christ in the Transfiguration. Then you have a next period of 40, which is their 40 years wandering in the wilderness, until such a point as they came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And then there was a 7-year conquest for the land of Canaan, after which the land rested from war and the lots were parceled to the tribes in Joshua 13. So what you have here is the law is a foreshadow pointing to Christ. Legitimately, that's exactly what it did. And when you plug the numbers in world history back in, again, 1406 is when the Jubilees begin. So you're not actually supposed to start at creation, but you can calculate back to creation if you use the same pattern. But you're supposed to count forward. There are 70. This is the 70th, if 1406, then 2025, but always Nisan 10. After which there will be a 7-year conquest for the land. The land's going to rest from war. And the very last thing that occurs in Ezekiel's end times vision is the lots are parceled to the tribes again in the kingdom. This is also the very last thing that occurs in the book of Daniel, Daniel 12, as after the end of those 1335 days from the midpoint of the 70th week, Daniel's told to go his way and rest till the NB is going to stand in his lot at the end of the days. So at the end of those 75 days, beyond the end of the 70th week, they're going to be standing in the lots that are parceled to the tribes in the kingdom. So basically what you have, Ezekiel's end times vision is a mini book of Joshua, where you have a benchmark event, which is in Joshua, them entering the promised land, which begins a count of 7 years, after which the land rests from war and there's a parceling of the lots to the tribes. That's what Ezekiel's end times vision does in chapter 40, is there's a benchmark event, which is the measuring of the temple. It's tied to seal 1. There's a 7-year conquest for the land, after which the land rests from war. Chapter 43 has the anointing of the most holy, which is the 6th and final purpose for the 70 weeks. And then the lots are parceled to the tribes in the kingdom in chapter 48. But when you plug these numbers back in, again, this Jubilee year to this Jubilee year housed the ministry of Christ. And there's a period of 40 without him, which is our period of trial, testing, and temptation. It's fasting in the absence of the bridegroom. Mark 1 and Mark 2 talk about that. If you haven't seen my Mark 1 and Mark 2 videos, specifically Mark 2, if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to, because it talks about the importance of the 40. 40 in the likeness of Jesus beginning his ministry with fasting. And then in Mark 2, him previewing the time when the bride would fast from the presence of her bridegroom. It's a period of 40, after which the Lord is going to return. And so shall we ever be with the Lord, intended to be understood as we shall no more fast from the presence of the bridegroom. and our period of trial, testing / tribulation, which he said in John 16, in the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. That's our period of 40 that we're presently in, which will end on Nisan 9 of the 40th Jubilee year after Christ, which is going to be like in April this year. And then the 70th week would commence on Nisan 10. So this, I understand that there is a reticence about the 6,000 years. People think it needs to be exact. No, it doesn't. And Peter doesn't actually tell you that it does. It's in the likeness of the Sabbath, not the exactness of the Sabbath. And then also the 123, people are like, well, I don't know about that. Okay, and that's cool. But when you understand this, and you understand that the law was a foreshadow of Christ, you overlay this by the pattern in the Mount, from Exodus 19 through the end of Exodus 40, and then into Joshua. It's a precise overlay of world history in type and shadow. There are 6,034 years of world history. Technically 6,033 and a half, but there are that number. And you get to that number by counting the Jubilees plus or minus 49, and you get to that by calculating 123 plus the extra 7 years. So I understand that people might have questions. Totally cool. But welcome to my channel. I'm going to tell you things that other people aren't going to tell you. I'm going to show you things that other people aren't going to show you. That's through no fault of my own. But we're definitely going to understand the plain text. We're going to understand in context, and then we're going to understand about 4 different types and shadows that solidify our understanding. It might make some people uncomfortable. That's okay. Comfort zones are where learning grows to die. Or goes to die, rather. So if you're interested in learning and being stretched, you've come to the right place. And if you're not, that's awesome too. I wish you to find whatever it is that you want to find, to have whatever understanding it is you need to have to be satisfied or to be settled or to be resolved. That is awesome. But as regards the end times, we're going to do plain text, we're going to do in context, and we're going to do a half a dozen types and shadows. Maybe not that many, maybe 4 types and shadows, to make sure that we understand it all correctly, to make sure that we understand that the Bible reinforces itself in multiple different ways, because different people have different learning styles. So we're going to find them all. This is one of them. If you guys have questions, let me know.